hello. Welcome along to another adventure in pop. This is episode 13, I think. And by the way, you're looking lovely. You look younger every day. I don't know how you do that. I'm going to talk today about, the ghost of a recording studio is really my subject today. And it's just something that popped up. I'll tell you the story. Here we are. I was reading the very latest edition of Mojo magazine. Now, look, I don't know if you know about Mojo magazine. It's basically for old people, I think. Particularly with the demise of Q magazine for us here in the UK. If you're basically a bit old, my generation, then you're expected, I think, to get Mojo. And sometimes it's interesting. I'm not here to sing its praises or to ridicule it in any way, but it is what it is. On the cover this month is Kate Bush, and so I was intrigued. I love Kate Bush. I thought, let's see what they've got to say about Kate Bush. Obviously, nothing really new. They're going back over old stuff, but some nice old photographs and an old interview that never got published, which is it's almost exciting. The thing that really grabbed my attention though was that she somewhere in the middle of all this blurb, she talks about how she recorded, I think it was her fourth album, her fourth difficult album, The Dreaming, the one that everybody goes, I know I'm supposed to like it. And I know some people really do. It's not the one I can actually listen to. But she recorded that at the Townhouse Studios in West London. And I just want to talk about the Townhouse Studios in West London because she got me thinking. Right, the Townhouse Studios is no longer there, and that's really the main point of this. It was a most magnificent and wonderful recording studio by all reports. And the thing that's so interesting about it for me, really on a very personal level, is that it was in Goldwood Road, and that is about, it's a few hundred yards from where I live. I can go and have a look at where it once was within the space of about, I guess it would take me about 4 or 5 minutes to walk round there. So I'm really, really near. That is the part of West London in which I live. And the thing that is so really interesting and kind of melancholy and sad about the Townhouse Studios in West London is it no longer exists. But more than that, there's nothing there at all that tells you that it ever existed. And I think that is a real shame. I think that we're missing a trick. There are no blue plaques. There are no names of anybody. There's no statue. There's nothing like that at all. It is now, as you would expect, it is now in West London, some rather expensive apartments. I think they look like they're quite plush. And I guess they've taken over where the studio was. So there's some interesting spaces they've got. So look, I want to tell you a little bit about what I know about the Townhouse Studios. And should we start with the roll call of some of the people? I went straight to Wikipedia and then checked a few different sources just to see if some of the names matched up, and some names were here. But it is the most extraordinary roll call of particularly British, kind of recording rock royalty who have set foot in that place, which is a few hundred yards round the corner from me, over the years until it got sold off and made into apartments, which is such a kind of, modern kind of situation. I guess that was about 8 or 9 years ago. And as I say, so sadly that you could walk past there and never know it ever existed. I'm going to tell you, okay, here are some of the names. And I want you to gasp as I go through this, because I did, frankly, and it is really impressive. So in no particular order, this is just the order that I kind of wrote them down, okay? Elton John, interesting. He did the Candle in the Wind second version, the one for Princess Diana's funeral there. So maybe that's not the most auspicious place to start. Although it became the best-selling single, ever in the world ever. So Candle in the Wind, Elton John. Simple Minds recorded there. The Killers, Sting, the Kaiser Chiefs, the Sex Pistols. We really are, we're travelling the whole wide gamut of, as I say, rock royalty. Queen, talking of royalty, Phil Collins, Philip Bailey. I guess those two names came up together. Makes me think Easy Lover. The Jam, Asia, Brian Ferry. Oh, Asia's interesting because that's slightly different from the rest, not quite so British. Brian Ferry, Coldplay, Muse, Duran Duran, Jamiroquai, Kylie, not entirely British, Oasis, XTC, Robbie Williams, Peter Gabriel, Joan Armatrading, Kate Bush, as we mentioned, Blur, and Frank Zappa. Now that's quite a roll call, isn't it? Can you imagine? Can you imagine if they all got together to do, I mean, obviously they can't now; they're not all with us. But if they all got together to do kind of like a supergroup album, that's some bunch of people, isn't it? And we're from the kind of real rock avant-garde of Frank Zappa to the I suppose the Brit rock nonsense of the 90s with Blur and Oasis and Robbie Williams, etc. But I think that's a pretty damn impressive list. And my point is, as I say, sadly, there's no mention of any of that. So look, here's the other thing I found out, just doing a little bit of research, is the Townhouse Studios, West London. It was set up by Richard Branson, and I think it was owned initially by Virgin. So, and apparently Richard Branson's brief to the people building the studio was really simple, very clear, and it was just to build the best studio in the world. In a bit of a kind of no expense spared kind of way, and apparently it was an absolutely amazing studio. So for many of those people, I think it was really a place where they knew that they could really indulge in fantastic sound quality. And Phil Collins recorded a very famous sequence, basically the very famous drum roll for In the Air Tonight. He did the rest of the song, but he did that drum roll there as well. And that became so kind of iconic that people wanted to use the studio that he'd worked in to be able to try and create that kind of drum sound for themselves. So that's a special little kind of, tick. That deserves a blue plaque all on its own, doesn't it? And, for goodness sake, all the rest of them, they should all have blue plaques. I'm all for giving out blue plaques. So it's an impressive list. So it was fantastic quality. It belonged to Richard Branson. It was owned by Virgin, and then eventually got sold off again. And as I say, sadly now it is. It's just some nice apartments. Now I popped down there. When I saw all this, I got so excited. I ran down there and just took some very fleeting moments of video because I looked a bit weird doing it, to be honest, because there's nothing there. That's the whole point. There's nothing there. But I just want to. I'm going to show you those, and I want to leave you with just two thoughts because we're going to keep it kind of brief today. One is that on one of the videos you'll probably see that there's a bunch of shop fronts that are on the Goldwood Road, and actually the Townhouse Studio kind of was behind those. It kind of came round the side and over the top, but for the Goldwood Road there was a bunch of shop fronts, and they're largely the same now as they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, I've lived here for over 25 years. Yeah, I know. Move on. And there's an Indian restaurant, there's a newsagent, and interestingly there's also a vet in the middle of all that. Now, here's the thing. I used to have 2 cats, okay? And when I went away and had to, no one was going to be here, I would take them to that vet because they were really nice and they would look after your cats. They would, they had a little cattery, I think that's what it's called. So, so my cats often went to stay at that vet, basically in the Townhouse Studio. I mean, they were obviously just slightly next door, or maybe they were underneath it. I'm not quite sure how that worked, but they were, they were almost in the recording studio with all these people. And I was aware of that at the time. I used to joke about it. I used to think, it's so funny. They go to they go for a weekend or a week, at the Townhouse Studio, and they're sitting around in their cat area, listening to these great people making their albums. And I used to give them a long, hard stare when they came back and think, are you going to tell me what you've been listening to? And they never did, because they were incredibly professional and they weren't going to divulge any of the stuff they'd heard about. But I'm sure that my two cats had heard a whole load of albums before I heard it. And, I did want to kind of know their secrets, and they were never telling. So just want to bear that one in mind. It was always really intriguing. And the other thing, I think the last thought that I want to leave you with on this profoundly interesting adventure, a slightly sad and melancholic adventure, is I wonder what it's like for the people who now live in those apartments. I mean, maybe somebody's watching who lives in those, but I'd love to know. In fact, I'd love to come around and have a look at all those apartments, because I'm just really curious. And I know that there were 3 main recording rooms called Room 1, Room 2 and Room 4. Don't ask me what that's about, but that's the story. I'm just thinking, imagine now that, your bedroom is where Oasis were recording, was where Queen were, trying to work out some intricate, bits of recording trickery and or any of those people. I mean, it's just extraordinary, and it makes me think. I wonder if sometimes really late at night, when it's really quiet. I mean, if they listen really carefully, I wonder. Sometimes you think, maybe the walls can tell stories, or you could hear a bit of something seeping up through the floorboards. There must be ghosts, mustn't there, in that place, that of some of that music, of some of that spirit, of all of that creativity, of all of that, great musicianship. There must be something left behind there. That's my view. That's what I'm thinking. That if you live there, you must be able to hear mysterious bits of melody and think, why am I hearing that? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? But as I say, you could walk down the Goldwood Road today, and you would just pass by, as you see in my little rather roughshod videos, you would just see a bunch of nondescript, quite big apartments. But even then, you wouldn't even necessarily know unless you went round the side that they're biggish. And there's nothing there to say that any of this ever happened, and I think that's a shame. So I'm starting a campaign today. Well, I'd love to think that some of this music could be commemorated, and some of the great people who crossed the threshold of the Townhouse Studio in Goldwood Road could be remembered in some way. That'd be great. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there, but thank you, and we'll meet again very, very soon and have another adventure very shortly. You be good and take care of yourself. Bye-bye.